you a nice person? I mean, are you a nice person who perhaps has a sneaky suspicion that they are really horrid? That might sound daft, but as this episode unwraps, you'll know just what I mean. This is Self-Belief Unsquashed. I'm Trisha Lewis, your host, and that's what we're trying to do. Just unsquash things that get in the way of your self-belief. And believe me, as humans, there are loads of those, and a lot of them originate in fear. And this fear that we're talking about in this episode, I suppose, ultimately is a fear of rejection or a fear of our darker selves, and that we might be found out. And this is where it all started. A book called If I'm So Successful, Why Do I Feel Like a Fake? And it's by Harvey and Katz, two researchers who delved into the imposter phenomenon. And there was one particular chapter or segment of a chapter that I wanted to make this episode about, and it is the imposter phenomenon, or let's just say syndrome, shall we? And the nice person. There's something tricky about this whole being nice, isn't there? I've got a confession to make. I like watching things like Married at First Sight and Love is Blind. There we go. Highly intellectual programs. I fool myself that it's because I like to study human behavior, and I do. And one thing you'll always note in these shows that are all about people fast tracking a romantic relationship is that, to begin with, people are on their best behavior generally. I mean, obviously it's edited for entertainment, but it's the case for ourselves, isn't it? When we are going on a first date or going on an interview or any of those things, that we are putting on our best self to the world. But of course, those relationships in those reality TV programs only really begin to work, if they've got any chance of working, when those couples start being more themselves. And that means inevitably showing their bad moods, showing their quirks and irritabilities, and maybe losing their temper a little bit. Just normal stuff when the mask drops. So what I'm really saying is that in order to develop any kind of relationship to really exist properly, we do have to show our less perfect selves. There are so many examples on TV, in films, in books. You could take people like Elizabeth Bennett in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. You know, we like her because she's more straight talking. She's not perfect, and that in the end gets her the man. We could talk about all sorts of characters in Shakespeare, but let's not go there. We could talk about Betty in Mad Men, if you've ever seen that, the 1950s, 60s perfect housewife married to the very handsome Don Draper, and everything about her is just so tightly perfect. And then we've got in the same program people like Joan and Peggy, who are less perfect. They allow themselves to be more vulnerable. They push themselves out there a bit more. They say no more. And they ultimately seem to be more rounded and, to a certain extent, less of a boiling pressure cooker like Betty is. And of course, she doesn't seem very happy, and she does explode at one stage. But no spoilers. So this is all around us, this idea that being nice might be a good way of attracting somebody, of getting a job, of being popular online or on LinkedIn or whatever. But actually, it won't build a proper relationship, and it won't make us happy. And the more we do it too much, the more we begin to resent ourselves. We don't want to be like this all the time. And then this really weird thing happens. So How come we then turn it around and decide that actually we're total imposters because we're not even remotely nice? We're horrible. Let me read a bit from this book I mentioned by Harvey and Katz, written in 1985. People explain that although the world sees them as being basically nice or good, deep inside they often feel unworthy. These were people that they interviewed, people that they saw as in their consultancies or whatever. So they explained that the world sees them as being basically nice or good. Deep inside, they often feel unworthy, though. Unworthy, mean, hostile, selfish, envious. And well, we all know about the envious one, don't we? And sometimes even evil. They believe that they have deceived others into liking or loving them by showing only nice or good feelings and behavior in public. They keep their terrible emotions and thoughts a shameful secret. People with these types of imposter syndrome feelings assume, on an emotional level, that thoughts are more real than actions because they're thinking some of these evil things, and we all think them, don't we? We all have ragey thoughts about somebody who's just barged in front of us on the road or in a supermarket queue or nearly tripped us up on the pavement. No big deal, but every day we will have a thought that we wouldn't want to actually have heard outside of our heads. But we're not that thought. That's just a part of being human. So it goes on to say, this is how Anita, aged 44, described her feelings. See if you can relate to this. I feel I have to pay for anything I get. If somebody gives me something or does something for me, I'm immediately overwhelmed with the feeling that I have to make up for it because I'm not worthy, not the person they thought I was. If I was, I'd deserve it. But since I'm not, I don't. If someone gives me directions on the street, I feel like I have to run home and make them a pie. I love that. I mean, we could think of loads of little anecdotes, couldn't we, to illustrate that? When you go into a charity shop, I don't know if this happens where you are, a thrift shop, a charity shop, and they're on the sort of card payment thing, comes up a little extra. Would you like to donate £1 extra to this charity or whatever? And you're part of you thinks, oh gosh, I better, otherwise I'm going to look like a really mean person. But actually, you've literally just donated to the charity because you've just bought stuff from their shop. And you're thinking, I don't really have that money to spare at the moment. Oh my gosh, I better though, because otherwise, look, everyone's looking at me. They're all going to think, what a mean person, what a selfish person. Doesn't care about anybody in the world. Help. And we could go on. You end up paying money to go to a conference, say, that you really don't want to go to. It's not that relevant to you. And yet somebody you know is running it, or people are being speakers there that you know, and you just think, oh, I'm going to look so unsociable and so unsupportive if I don't go. I'll get my credit card out, I'll be paying this off for the next 6 months, but I don't want to be seen as a mean person who doesn't care about anybody and what they're doing. Oh, here's another one. This might resonate. When you do emails and you spend ages thinking, I think I need to put a smiley face in there. If I don't put a smiley face in there, they'll think I'm being just rude or, just too demanding or something, or I'm too serious. I mean, that's not me. I'm not, I do have a sense of humor and I'm lovely, and I don't want, oh my gosh. And I don't even know how to sign this off. Should I put a kiss? No, not a kiss. That's over the top. But I don't want them to feel like I'm being too sort of cold and clinical and, oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the too nice trap again, isn't it? And it really does come back down to that. What am I scared of? Why are they going to think I'm a horrid person just because I don't put a smiley after every paragraph or lots of exclamation marks? Use your voice, and hopefully that comes across. And it's context specific, isn't it? Of course, sometimes you're relating to people who know that you like to use lots of smiley faces and emojis and exclamation marks, and that's what they expect. So don't suddenly become something that they don't expect, because that's the other problem with this. The disconnect, if you are one thing one minute and then you're seen as something else the next minute, that's a real freak out in terms of trust. That really gets people concerned. So slight modifications, yes, but don't suddenly become someone else, either too nice or too not nice, whatever it is. So now take this dark self issue that we're worried about revealing all this bit of us. And in fact, we're only putting on an act. Surely people can see that we're not really nice. That's not true, is it? You are nice, but you are also human. And we're quite primal in our anger and our envy and our frustration and all those sort of things that come into our thoughts sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. We wouldn't be human if we didn't have those really basic emotions. But we filter stuff and we manage stuff so that we don't go around saying stuff out loud like maybe a child would. And we learn how to be polite, don't we, as we grow up, and we're taught all these manners and things. But what happens if we take that too far, and that we completely hide our shadow self, as Carl Jung referred to it? We just, that cannot show. We have to push that down at all costs, and we must only show this persona of niceness. In other words, our mask must remain all the time, except maybe when we go to bed at night or we're somewhere on our own. So that could affect work, relationships, and just our general sense of being able to develop as a human being. And it's not ideal, is it? We want to develop as a whole rounded human. And if we're cutting off a whole part of us and then also feeling like we're an imposter with the other half of us, then this isn't good for making us feel like a whole human being who's going to learn, who's going to make mistakes, who's going to laugh and cry and all the other things that humans need to do. As Carl Jung says, famous quote, "I'd rather be whole than good." That's what he suggests we should all be thinking. I'd rather be whole than good. So, to recap, as humans, we learn manners as we grow up, and we learn to hide some of the more spontaneous parts of us that might be embarrassing in social situations. We also learn how to please, because we want to please the people that are going to give us things like food and treats. So we learn all that behaviour, and that's fine. That's all part of a fairly natural, evolving human thing. But what about when that just becomes a safety blanket, that we actually dread the idea of moving away from that learnt politeness and niceness because we don't trust that people are going to accept us at all if we show any cracks? Then it becomes a problem. That's the too nice trap. That's when we can't express any opinions for fear that they're going to rub somebody up the wrong way. They might offend somebody. And I'm not talking about offensive opinions. I'm just talking about opinions where you don't speak up at a meeting or at a debate or on a panel or whatever it is, because you're worried that it's going to look like you're being too pushy. You need to let everybody else speak first. Well, of course you can be too pushy. Of course you can be the big blabbermouth that won't let anybody else get a word in, and that's not good. But neither is it good to go down the other end of that spectrum and be over polite about letting everybody speak first. Or maybe you're just going to nod and agree with everybody. And we don't want that, do we? Because that's not going to make for a very interesting debate, discussion, or meeting. So it's generally going to hold you back if you get so obsessed with holding on to this persona that you feel people accept. And the thing is that you actually haven't really tested them out, have you? So you don't know what they're thinking. You just think you do. But actually, given an opportunity to see a more rounded version of you that is more, able to express some opinions, more able to be a bit moody occasionally, more able to get a bit stroppy about something, or even, just to laugh at something and in a sort of non-professional way, any of those things that make you a whole human being. How do you know that those people wouldn't love to see that? You don't. You're just assuming. You're just so wrapped up in this idea that the only version of you that is acceptable is this lovely, nice one, that you're not even giving people a chance to prove you wrong. And that's the problem. For me, a lot of it is, I think, to do with my persona as a humorous person, as a warm, humorous person. And if I show a more serious side, if I get a little bit too, I don't know, a bit too academic, a bit too, right, this is a very serious matter, very, very, a bit too corporate, a bit too any of those things, even if it's the tiniest little bit that is probably needed for that occasion, I still worry that people are suddenly going to reject me. Oh, we thought Trisha was this lovely, warm, cuddly, funny person, But actually, I'm aware, looking back at some of the videos that I did when I first set up my coaching business, that I was too warm and fluffy in some of them. And I had really good, serious advice, tips, insights to deliver. And I could have done it with a smile, but maybe toned down the humor, the fluffiness, the loveliness a little bit. So that's something I've had to work on. And I think if you put into that mix whatever your thing is that you're holding on to as being the persona that you think everybody likes, and think, oh, do I turn that up too high? Could I risk turning that back down a little bit? So a good way of describing this is, I just mentioned sort of spectrum. So if you imagine assertiveness, now some people think assertiveness is a bad thing. It sort of has a image of being a bit bossy, a bit up yourself, a bit, demanding, dominating. Well, actually, the official spectrum is passive at one end, aggressive at the other end, and assertive in the lovely sweet spot in the middle. So we've got an illusion about assertiveness that we need to ditch. Assertiveness requires strength and warmth. It requires a mix for you to be clear, for you to be heard and engaged with, and all those things. It requires that mix. And the same applies to being nice and being real, honest. It requires a mix, a blend. When I'm talking about soft and hard, warm and strong, and all of those mixes that we're trying to go for, I first started really delving into this when I read a book called Compelling People, The Hidden Qualities That Make Us Influential, by John Neffinger and Matthew Kohut. And I still recommend this book. I've had it really to hand for many years. So where do we go with this? Before I wrap up with a couple of perhaps experiments that you could try, I'm just going to lift this huge and very serious book up called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. And there's one of the laws, because it goes through quite a few, is the law of repression. And that's really what we were talking about with this Carl Jung shadow self, this dark side. And I'd just like to read this initial paragraph. Ready? Robert Greene. He's written some great books. I'll reference, obviously. People are rarely who they seem to be. That's a good start, isn't it? Lurking beneath their polite, affable exterior is inevitably a dark shadow side consisting of the insecurities and the aggressive, selfish impulses they repress and carefully conceal from public view. This dark side leaks out in behaviour that will baffle and harm you. Learn to recognise the signs of the shadow before they become toxic. See people's overt traits, toughness, saintliness, etc., as covering up the opposite quality. You must become aware of your own dark side. In being conscious of it, you can control and channel the creative energies that lurk in your unconscious. And by integrating the dark side into your personality, you will be a more complete human and will radiate an authenticity that will draw people to you. Brilliant. Play that back. That's such a good way of describing it. He talks about creative energy, and that's really crucial because some of that darker side, that shadow self that you think you've got to keep repressed, is a very important part of energy, creativity, spontaneity, instinct, standing up for yourself when you need to, saying no, setting boundaries, all of those things. And so to just keep it boxed up is not a good idea because you are going to be in a fight. And when you're in that internal fight, there is a risk that you are suddenly going to blow a fuse at a very inappropriate moment in an overblown way. So by regulating and keeping those dark and wonderful, nice sides assimilated rather than divided, you might avoid those tensions that result in this pressure cooker blowing. So I suppose that's the task, really, is instead of denying your darker sides, we've all got them. We're human. So number one, you are not your thoughts. So you don't have to have this odd feeling that you, just because you've had a slightly horrid thought, that makes you a horrid person. Not happening. We're all doing it all the time. Normal. And then having recognized that, so you're now going to get those darker bits of you, the shadow bits of you, if you like, which have plenty of positives in them, out on the forensics table, as I like to say, and become your detective self and think, okay, so I tend to get a bit thingy about that, and I get a bit angry, and I can get a bit stroppy about this, and those various things that you think shouldn't be shown to the world, and think, but actually there's a positive side to that. How could I take that and actually put it to use in a good, healthy, creative, motivating, helpful way? So that's an interesting little exercise to do. But at the core of that is what I nearly always say, self-awareness and taking some of the emotional muddle out of your thinking, which happens with things like imposter syndrome and self-squashing and all of that, and just being more forensic, thinking, okay, this is that, that's this, but could be this, couldn't it? And maybe I just need to turn this bit up and turn that bit down, and then, yeah, you're in charge of your mixer board. You are a lovely person, but lovely people who are just being lovely for the sake of it because they're scared stiff that anything less than lovely will have them thrown out into the wilderness, are not doing themselves a favor or anyone else around them a favor, because you're not living your truth. And there's a lot more to you than that lovely person, isn't there? Hang on a minute. I didn't mention my book, The Mystery of the Squashed Self. Well, the actual chapter in here is called The Too Nice Trap. And it's the first of 8 cases that are brought to Investigator Lewis to unravel by small business owners who are self-sabotaging. And in this case, it's because she's being too nice and she doesn't like it. So I'll just read you a tiny little, give you a flavour of the style of this book. So the client is giving her story to Investigator Lewis, who is listening and taking notes. Do you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm showing up as Baby Spice when I am more Mel B. I can feel myself being all nice and sweet and agreeing and saying yes when I should be saying no. I'll just give you that as a little taster. I mentioned a book at the beginning by Harvey and Katz, and in it there is this test that you can do, and it's the Harvey IP scale. It's brilliant, but what I've done is I've created little images of it and placed a PDF on my website so you can have a go with a notepad and pencil and test yourself. There's another one on there as well. In fact, there's also a squashometer test that I made up. So head over to trishalewis.com and it's on the Stay Unsquashed, the resources page of my website. I'll link it below, but have some fun. There's loads of other stuff on there as well, and links to my book, my TEDx, and yeah, just keep unsquashing.